The session is about to begin.
Hello, friends, and welcome to this session. A good day to you from whichever part of the world you're logging in, and a very happy new year. It's my pleasure to introduce the panel today discussing other Kohinoors, which has been described as a love letter to Hyderabad. My name is Giridhar Rao, and I will first present the two producers of the film, followed by a brief word about the moderator of the session. Uma Magal is the owner of Fenugreek Productions, a boutique studio for media and film work and training. She has an MA in political science from the University of Hyderabad and an MA in communication from the Mass Communication Research Center at Jamia Millia Islamia in Delhi. During her years in the United States, she earned an MFA in film production from Temple University, produced a PBS weekly series called News 6, taught film and media at San Francisco State University and Temple University, and served on the boards of Asian Arts Initiative and Independent Film and Video Association in Philadelphia. On returning to India, she served as independent faculty in film aesthetics, documentary production, and Indian cinema at COMITS, Bengaluru, the University of Hyderabad, and Annapurna Film School as well. She co-produced and co-directed a feature documentary on theater, The Players, which was subsequently acquired by NDTV. She has worked in diverse capacities in theater, as lead actor, as well as in production and writing in Delhi, Bengaluru, and Hyderabad. With her is Mahnur Yar Khan, who's a filmmaker and a drama therapist. Mahnur has a degree in psychology and sociology from Osmania University in Hyderabad. She started her career as a filmmaker in Toronto, Canada in 1983. She was assistant editor on Ordure, a student film that won the jury prize at the Canadian Student Film Festival. In the same year, she worked on the film Bread as production manager, which won the Blue Ribbon Award at the 26th American Film Festival in 1984. Since then, she has worked on a number of social service films in India in the capacity of director. In 1991, she co-directed the film Farewell to Sri Lanka, which was selected for screening the following year at the Mumbai International Film Festival. In 2016, she curated a multimedia show on Palestine that included 50 artworks produced by young artists from Gaza. The show traveled to 5 cities and was held at multiple venues. In conversation with them is Nikhila H., who's a professor and head Department of Film Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, where she teaches and researches in the areas of film studies and gender studies. Nikhila has been teaching for nearly 25 years, first at Mount Carmel College, Bengaluru, Pondicherry Central University, Puducherry, and now in EFL University, Hyderabad for the last 12 years. She got her doctorate for a dissertation on gender and partition. She has organized seminars, film festivals, and workshops, and presently is a coordinator of an online film discussion forum called Talking Films Online. She supervises research in film studies, and 8 students have been awarded PhD degrees under her supervision. Her recent publications are on filmic remakes and multimodal translations between various Indian languages. Her current research projects include a commissioned essay for a volume on Shyam Benegal and for a collaborative volume on new cinemas of India, where she is researching on New Age Kannada films. My task is to introduce our speakers. I will reappear about 45 minutes later and field questions from our worldwide audience. So now let me hand the screen. The screen is yours, Nikhila.
Thank you very much, Professor Giridhar Rao, for the introductions. I'm indeed very privileged to be in conversation today with the two filmmakers, Uma Magar and Kohinoors, filmmakers of this wonderful film called Other Kohinoors, The Rocks of Hyderabad. The film, as the title suggests, is of course about the rocks of Hyderabad. Among the many reasons for which the film, could be seen as important, two really stand out for me. One is it's a film that is documenting the rapidly changing topography of Hyderabad. Probably even as we are speaking, there are so many changes happening in terms of the topography of the city. And some of the footage that the film captures may probably by now be only on the footage and not in the place. The rocks may not be there anymore. So in that sense, it's documenting a city under change, under transition. The other very important reason why this film means something to a viewer would be because it looks at rocks as part of the cultural history of the city. Obviously, it's a film made by two people who are passionate about the city, who have probably a special relationship with the city. So we could really begin by asking both Uma and Kohinoor to talk about their relationship with the city of Hyderabad. Of course, we know it's a globalizing city with all kinds of ambitions and aspirations tied to the space. What space do the rocks occupy in this globalizing city? Uma, maybe we could begin with you, and then Kohinoor could come in after that. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Nikhila, for having us, and HLF and Kinera and Giridhar. We're really very happy to be having this conversation. To answer your question, I'll jump straight to it. It's hometown. Hyderabad is home. And so that's always a very special relationship. And, there are so many memories tied up with growing up here, living here, studying here at the University of Hyderabad. And that rockscape was an education in itself. I mean, apart from what we learned in class. And then I raised my children in Hyderabad. So it's a whole bundle of connections there. So, and it's not just me. I think anyone you speak to who lives in Hyderabad will have these connections and ties to the city and the rocks. The city just does that, So, yeah, Manu?
Hi, Nikhila. Lovely talking to you. I think growing up here among the rocks was very much part of life and living. Our picnics were among the rocks, discovering various lakes and new rock sites were also very much a part of what we were doing during our off time, given that TV and the phone wasn't very much a part of our lives at that time. And that has changed over the years. I mean, it's today just trying to get out of the house and walk. You don't see the rocks anymore. Unless you drive out of the city, given also the fact that you can't walk around among those beautiful rocks and experience them. So yeah, it's a fight to try and retain what we have, but growing up has been quite an experience with the rocks.
Thank you, Uma and Kohinoor, for sharing your special bond with the city. One thought that came to me before I watched the documentary was that, in this time of environmental concern and everyone is talking about ecology, the disappearing lakes and rocks. So I thought that, this film might tell us about the relationship maybe between the geo world and the bio world, the fact that rocks predate human existence. And yet you've chosen a very different kind of framework and approach to the rocks. You have situated it in the cultural history in some ways of the city. Could you talk a little bit about, this focus? Because obviously, I don't think it was readily available to you, this kind of a cultural history. So how did, this idea come up, and how did you go about putting together the story of the rocks among many other stories inhabiting the city?
Yeah, I think it's such a, totally first question that one asks, and I myself asked it of myself, that how does one approach this? And straight away, I think both Manur and I are fully feel that this is a unique city with a unique landscape and a unique culture. So, that somehow just sits well together, in the mind, that they both come together, the unique city landscape and the unique culture. And so I think that was maybe the subconscious prod for thinking about it this way. And then the more obvious ones were, of course, as a filmmaker, I didn't want to make an interview-based documentary. I think there's a very good place for interview-based documentary. And my previous one was an interview-based documentary. There's a place for it. But in this matter, I thought what we really need is a way to touch people's hearts, just capture their imagination, just sort of reconnect them to this wonderful landscape, and the best way that appeared was through the cultural connections, because the culture itself celebrates the rocks in such beautiful ways and shows so much affection, so much respect for the landscape and the rocks. So it just flowed, in visualizing the film. So that was it. And I think I must say, I'm very proud of how successful it is. The way people have responded in the premiere, of course, that was huge. And then in the outreach that we're doing, the kind of responses, the kind of things people are saying about their reconnection to the landscape it just makes it all worthwhile. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think also during our research, we met some really amazing people who were very culturally rooted in Hyderabad and to Hyderabad, right? And so just what they gave us, whether it was Jagdish Mittal and his miniature paintings and talking about the Dakhani paintings, etc., to Shakib Saab himself, who is an archaeologist and a historian, and his knowledge of Urdu poetry and with the landscape and what it have to offer. Sajjad Shahid himself also, who's with Intact. So we met a number of very erudite people within the city who I think what Uma said, it was solidified the idea that, yes, this is the way we have to go, and not, as you mentioned, through geology and ecology. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to give away too much because people will hopefully be watching this film later this month at the HLF venue. But just to talk about the wide variety of connections that it draws out. For instance, between rocks and cuisine, rocks and mythology, rocks and song and cinema. So there's such a wide variety, rocks and art, and so many different strands, connections that the film makes. So obviously, as Manu just said, you've met people who are able to help you make these connections. But can you also just talk about this process of research itself that took you in so many diverse directions? I think you began documenting it in the form of a series, Uma. You documented it probably in the form of a series of articles for the newspaper before it transformed into a documentary. Could you just take us through this initial research? Because it seems like a very long period you've lived with this subject and made this film.
Yes, it's been a long period. It's been a decade, and I think it will last a while more. So that research is actually still ongoing for me. I mean, I can't say it's done, but yeah. So when we started it, it was obvious that one has to gather the data, to gather the knowledge, to gather all that. And so Mahanur and I, we put together lists of people who could help us, and we reached out to all of them. And it was just magical how many people agreed to meet us and talk to us and guide us. And, Narsingh Rao Burgula is a name I cannot ever not mention. He's just a legend in the city and has legendary knowledge of the city. So Shankar Milkote, Ismat Mehdi, so many people. I mean, Maan has mentioned some as well. So talking to them was a big part of this, And the second part was reading up on it. And so I really urge all of our viewers to, if they're interested in Hyderabad and the rocks and the landscape, to go to our website. There's a detailed bibliography there. And going through that, reading that, was another series of explosive windows opened, into what the nomenclature came from an article I'd read, and, this kind of thing. And the stories came from the way people told us, like, Ismat Mehdi told us the Amir Ali story, Amir Ali. I stand corrected. It's actually Amir Ali, I believe. So that story she told us. And as we were talking to her, when she mentioned that, it just struck me that this is pure gold. Look at this story that people tell about digging the rocks and a treasure underneath the rocks, how him having buried it. So things like that. And so many stories came up in various ways, either through people telling or through reading about them. And then the whole songs and all, the Telugu film song I knew, but there were the songs that we wrote, which was another huge adventure. And maybe I'll let Manu talk about that, because otherwise I'll be talking endlessly. So, a lot of it worked out like that. Some things we knew having grown up here, and some things we gathered either through people telling us or through reading about it. And then it was that moment of magic was always there, that when you heard something, you immediately knew this has a place in the film. Because usually it was a funny story or a beautiful line of song or a very moving kind of, lyric, or a poster or a piece of art, just driving around the city shooting. You saw that pop art on the walls of the bridges and all. Look at that. It's in our psyches. The rocks are very much part of our, I don't know too much about this, but the collective unconscious, as people say, it's part of that in Hyderabad. And so that became very important to sort of, ferret out and display and enjoy for everybody. So Man, you want to carry on?
Well, the song itself, which Uma sort of introduced, initially, Usha Raman from the University of Hyderabad. So Uma and Usha were writing that song, and Usha started off, and I looked at it and said, this is not, because it was very clear we weren't going to do interviews. And so when this idea from Uma of a song coming up, and Usha wrote it, I thought it wouldn't fit. It needed to change. But then the transformation over maybe 2 years that it took, with the addition of Dakhani and Telugu, and it was really exciting just watching that, of what all these artists the poets and the writers and did for it. And then putting it to music was also a struggle, because I think there was an idea of what needed to be done. We wanted to appeal to a younger audience, but not having any experience with rap or how to get a musician to compose that piece was quite an interesting struggle, because we, apart from getting artists to sing it, and it took us a while. And then fortunately, a musician we had who's written the score for the film said, you have to get a rapper, a DJ. And Zakir Alauddin, who is into music, suggested Murtu, who came on board and did an amazing job. Yeah.
And I just want to interject there a little bit, because Giri is right on this panel, and Giri was instrumental in adding one of the most powerful lyrics in that song. You know,
so this is the Giri.
A Kohinoor we did lose, but we can choose these riches to keep from a past so deep. Our rocky heritage, its strength, its splendor, the Deccan Plateau, its wealth, its wonder. Thank you, Giri. Once again.
Yes. So I must tell our viewers, you know, when you hear the term documentary, you might think that this is a series of interviews, or there is an omniscient voiceover which will, you know, give us knowledge about the subject. Well, this is a very different kind of documentary. For one, it is a series of images, you know, that are loosely held together. There are bits of history. There are stories in between that are narrated, and of course there is the song that both of them have so eloquently talked about, the rap, which kind of provides a kind of a loose framework to the entire film. The episodes are narrated, as Mahnur was saying, in different languages. Sometimes there is Telugu narration, sometimes it's Urdu. So it's a wonderful multilingual experience to be actually watching the film. There's nothing rigid or boring, you know, as one might expect a documentary to be. I also want to draw your attention, because it's an episode that, you know, again struck me. It's almost like a poetic ode to the Vaddars, the stone workers. And immediately after this episode on the Vaddars, you have this, you know, sound, the blast. The sound of the blast, and I think birds, agitated birds, just disperse. So this juxtaposition of the story about the Vaddars, and then the machine, the heavy machinery that is used to blast rocks. Can you just talk about this amazing, you know, piece of juxtaposition of two, I think, modes of development as I see it? Can you talk about this a little bit?
Nikhila, I just want to come and shake your hand and give you a hug or something, because you've just got it. You know, what was tried to be put across in that structure, that is exactly what you're saying. You know, the Vaddars were very dear to us in shooting. We shot so much footage. In fact, I want to make a separate film just on the Vaddars. We have so much footage. And that craft and that skill and that knowledge, you know, that is still everywhere around us in the city. So that is a very important thing in itself. And for me, you know, as you see in the film, there are no interviews, there are no people, really. It's only the Vaddars who we really see as people. And that's because their life is tied up with the rocks. You know, they are the people whose lives are completely intertwined with stone. And so it was very important to sort of highlight that in one way. So that's one reason they're there, for their craft, their skill, their lives, their livelihoods are all bound up with the rocks. Secondly, what you so, you know, intuitively and you have gauged it, you know, when we did development and destruction and taking of construction material from the rocks and all with the Vaddars' help, there was a limit to the damage we did, because it's human labor. It's what they could do. And, there was a clear limit. And that beautiful poem by Sikandar Ali Majd says it so beautifully, about their work, their lives, the way they leave behind these legacies for us to enjoy. All that is there in that. And the reason for this structure, where we go then to the blast, is to highlight how different it is when we use machinery. It's no longer human labor, which itself must, as you see in the footage of the Vaddas, we really need to take much better care of them. You see them, their feet are on the broken rock, they're working with their hands, they're coughing. We really need to take better care of them, first of all. And secondly, the contrast with the blast, when how much more destruction happens. And it's not only humans that are inhaling this dust and losing these rocks and all. It's the other flora and the fauna which we share the world with. So that point was very important to be made, and that was the way the structure sort of tells that story.
Yeah. So there are so many stories in this documentary. Uma already mentioned Amir Ali, the Amir Ali sequence, and then there is the story of Aurangzeb, and then the story of the cuisine of Hyderabad, the biryani, and the rock that changes shape to fit the vessel. And then, of course, the story of Renuka Yellama, which was my personal favorite. Not only for the manner in which it is narrated, but the animation was wonderful. And also this unexpected, I think there's a different perspective that is coming in, which highlights Yellama and her rock dwelling. So these are, I think, little insights that you're giving, not only about rocks, but also a different view on the mythology that you have brought into the film, in very different ways. Maybe both of you could talk about some of these changes that you envisage for the purpose of the documentary, to fit it into the documentary.
Man, maybe you can talk about the process of doing it, and I can talk about actually how I revisualized it. Yeah.
When we were researching on folklore, the University of Hyderabad has a special department there, and we met the professor there. And correct me if I'm wrong, Uma. And he sort of talked about Yellama and Renukama, and said that there are a number of stories. And a number of people will accept one or the other. So, you have that freedom to decide on which story you want.
And also for the process, I think, Man, you found Neha to do it so beautifully.
I'll come to that. So we then looked at how do we want to present all these stories right through. And it was, we looked at various art forms. So as you know, Biryani Shah Tekri is in the Bidri style, then the Dakhani miniatures in the Dakhani style. And we thought the Yellama Renukama story, what fitted really well was a whole sterile style of painting. And I had seen some works done by a young artist called Neha, who used to work at Hyderabad Urban Lab. And we got in touch with her, and she agreed to do it. She'd never done any Cherial style. So all we did was, there's a lot of Cherial online, and we offered her the look of what Cherial is. And then she produced that amazing artwork. I mean, it took some time of correcting it, looking at the way we wanted it, but she's quite the amazing artist. And
Yes, there was like scores of feedback for her, and she was very patient and incorporated it. Like you'll see the opening scene when it goes dark. and then the moon also, like
Yeah.
when Parshurama comes, the moon is frowning. And then at the end, when Yellamma goes back to her hut, the moon is smiling. So a lot of stuff, a lot of feedback was given to her, of course, but her work is very, very beautiful. So that was a real blessing. Just to quickly say that, before the professor, there was an Ogukatha performance at Lamakan of this Renukama Yellamma story. I had taken my kids because I said they must see Telangana folk art and work and all that, and so it was there that I first heard it. And the lament when Renukama runs from Parshurama, and the lament was so moving when they sang it, the Ogukatha artists. And and then they talk about the rocks, that Yellamma's house was in the rocks and Renukama found it and all that. So that was, it seemed like it was meant to be that we heard this story. And the interesting thing also is that usually when the story, to address your question, Nikhila, of how we remodified it for our purposes, and that's fine, because like Manu was saying, the prof said, it's a fluid tale and it's told in many, many ways with many additions and subtractions. So however you tell it, people love it, So for me, it was very important that Yellamma and the rocks are featured, and Renukama's trauma is featured. So these were the most important things for me. Usually when the story is told, it's told from the Parshurama and Jamadagni angle, that the father and the son. But I was very keen to make it from the ladies' angle, from the women. And so we start with the story with the frame of Yellamma's hut, and the beautiful nature around it, and the sky and the moon and the stars and the rocks, that beautiful first frame. And we end with Yellamma. And I thought that I'm very happy with that, because the focus is immediately shifted to them and Renukama and Yellamma coming together. And it's their heads that are exchanged, so it's all about them. And the Jamadagni and Parshurama, of course, are very important parts. And the three sons are very, very important parts, but they are parts. They're just parts of the whole and not the leading, icons of the story. So, yeah.
Also, this was something that when I was watching the film, again, I was just thinking about, maybe the process of shooting for this film. In the credits, you have a number of cinematographers, and also I was wondering, the volcano sequence, is it like archival footage? So how did you bring together all these, clips? So was it shot at different points in time? What was the principle, so to speak, of bringing together all these different kinds of footage? Probably they were all shot at different points of time by different people. What was your brief to your cinematographers? How did you go about that process?
Oh, wow. That's so the easy one there and the delightful one, all of it is good, but the most delightful is the opening lava footage. These are dear friends of mine, my own film school classmates, Mike Kiramayar and Anula Shetty. They were my classmates in film school, and they made their thesis film in our college days in Hawaii on the volcano there. So I had seen that footage, I've seen their film, I've endlessly seen that footage and all that. And so it suddenly struck me one day that, we were actually, Manur and I, and this is another part of that Cheryl story, that it was actually Neha drew it after intense workshopping with us, but the actual animation was done by Mr. Pavan, who is the professor of animation at Annapurna Film School. So, that animation part was done by him. Now, Pavan we had sort of talked to him a lot about an opening sequence where we show, the rocks of the earth, the geology, and the, from the core of the earth, magma erupts. And we've seen that endlessly. And we tried to make it fresh and nice. And we were miserable. Every time we look at it, we'd be like so depressed, like, oh God, this is opening of the film is going to put everybody off, and they'll be like groaning that one more documentary on, you know how it is. So then I suddenly remembered this volcano footage, and I said, maybe we could use that. And that's how I reached out to them, and they were delightful about it. They just gave it to us. And of course, it took some time for them to find it and for me to go through it and find the right, what was required, and then tell all that, but that's how that happened. And it's really one of my favorite openings, the sound in the beginning, before any visual. It's really the earth itself. And I think to go back to your first question, that I feel is the power of this film. That instead of showing it in the way you would expect, it comes at you at an oblique, and that catches your attention and then holds you, because the stories and the culture and the landscape is so riveting. More than anything to do with us, it is that material itself that's so riveting, that holds the people, and so, for the cinematographers, it was a revolving door of people who were kind enough to help. And since we shot over 7-8 years, as you mentioned, this is a city in transition, and it was very important to get that feeling. Biodiversity Park, that beautiful shot we have of the tilt down of that hill and the sheep, the goats on it, that's gone. That park is gone, and when that happened, 2019, I was like, let's stop this film. There's no use. Why should we do this? I mean, look, this is one of the most beautiful parts of the whole rock spaces of the city. It's a dedicated space. It was called the Biodiversity Park. And if that can be broken, then what are we doing here? So that was I think it was the lowest moment of the film, to see that broken hill of rock. But then, one hope is a thing with feathers, as we know. So we said, okay, now let's just push ourselves and see what we can do for the remaining rocks. Get a conversation going, which is all a film can do, really. Get the conversation going, and then whatever happens after that will happen. Depending on the people and the system and all that. That's not in our hands. But to get the conversation going is in our hands. So the cinematographers were great. We would just take them, like, supposing it was the Wadders, we would go there and all day we'd shoot the Wadders. We did that for 3 days in a row in one space. And then when the blast, where we shot the blast, there were Wadders there too. So that tilt down from the tree that opens the Wadders thing was in another location where the blast happened. And in fact, we were at Borabanda railway station shooting those signs and the train and all. And Manur got this call from Satya, Professor Satya at the Department of Communication, University of Hyderabad. And he said, he had told us to go to Borabanda. He was giving us directions to go there. We just about managed get there and set up the camera. And we got this call from Devika Bahudhanam. She's a wonderful, wonderful person, a great friend to this film and to the city and to the rocks. And Devika called us and said, come, you might be able to get some great footage of the Wadders and the blasting on my property, on her, her colony. So we ran from Borabanda, So, and so the camera people were also very good. They went along with us with whatever we asked of them. We have scores of unusable footage also, but lots of lovely footage, even more than what's used in the film. There's lots of footage. So yeah. So it was an adventure. Manu, wouldn't you say?
I think every shoot was quite the adventure.
Yeah.
Of climbing over walls and trying to get proper angles, or shooting before someone came to stop us from filming.
Yes.
Because we were on properties that were in fact around the corner where I live, and they were blasting rocks and digging, and we had to go in there and shoot before someone said, sorry, you can't film here. So that was also very much a part of it. It had its moments. I think technically there were some issues, especially on the editing table, when Uma suddenly saw all the various technical
problems. But I guess that's part of it. It's part of it. When you shoot over many years with different camera people, then you have to have technical issues, I guess. And fortunately, they all got sorted, and the film is there for everyone to see.
So So you just mentioned, Uma, about how one of the aims of making this film is also to get a conversation going. I think this is a good time to talk about the project, as you call it, associated with the film. So I visited your website. It's a fund of information. There's so much, about the film, but also about, related aspects, even other films on the changing topography of Hyderabad. And also your outreach program, taking it, to spaces where young people may watch the film or respond to the film. Can you talk about all these activities, around the film and why that is important? Why you didn't think that making a film is enough? Now, this is what is essential to take it and to get a conversation going.
I'll start and Manu will fill in on much of this, but I'll just say a little bit. I think the amount of wonderful material one found, not just in the shooting and all, but actually just the information we gathered. It's very natural for us. Now we're storytellers, we want to share those stories. It's such a natural instinct for human beings to tell, right? To show and tell, I guess. So part of it is that. So I'll just, and Man can fill in on this. We started this program straight away. First of all, we did the Hindu articles. I wrote those articles, sharing all that information. And then we started doing Amita Desai, I must mention, and the Goethe Zentrum, who have been a huge support to us in this whole endeavor. I don't think we would be here without them at all. So we approached Amita and said, why don't we do a series of online sessions? This was at the time of COVID, that, about all this information we found, and it's so wonderful and delightful. So then we did these sessions called I Am Here to Wonder sessions, which goes back, I don't want to get into that, but maybe Man, you can talk about the I Am Here to Wonder and then we can carry on.
So I'm Here to Wonder started off with music, Hindi, English, everything around the rock, film songs around the rocks. And the idea was to sort of rekindle the idea of that these rocks were so much a part of our daily song. So whether it was film, whether it was just singing. And we had English singers, Telugu singers, Dakhani singers come on stage. It was all, as Uma mentioned, online, and sing these songs, which was then presented to an audience. And there was then feedback, and we had the audience then try and come up with songs that they remembered of the rocks. Now, it wasn't necessarily Hyderabad rocks, but of rocks in general. So that was our first
And
I'm Here to Wonder.
It was called Geet Gaya Patharone.
That I forgot. Our second one was on food. And we were looking at Patthar Ka Gosh, and that was the idea, that you use this granite rock to make food on, plus all the pestles and implements that you used, which were made out of granite and stone. So again, that it's so much a part of our culture. But to make it more exciting, we decided to have a cook-along. And so Minu Appa, now I'm trying, we call her Minu Appa, but her name is
Dilnaz Beg.
Dilnaz Beg. Dilnaz Beg is a well-known chef. And she caters, serves Hyderabadi khana on a dastar khan, on a chowki. She organizes these lunches and dinners. And she is well known for her Hyderabadi food. So she agreed to cook mirchiyon ka salan, which we then went in. Safed mirchi ka salan, out of these, it's a white mirchi ka salan. And to encourage people that here's this cooking along, but we are also talking about all these stones. And we had two speakers, one Uma, I'm forgetting their names.
Yeah, it is Abhinav Patel and Rajeshwari Kalyan.
Rajeshwari.
And
So
Julie-
Rajeshwari talked about Telugu food and also about how in the temple cuisine, temples during special festivals, they actually brought this mortar and pestle and they cooked at the temple. And Abhinav Patel talked about the history of Dakhani food, which he's been researching, and he's coming out with a cookbook. He lives in Bombay now, but he's from Hyderabad. And so there were all these people who decided, yes, we'll come on board and we'll talk about our khana. And so did Dilnaz Beg. And that was, she has a large following. So we were very lucky there. And we put our rock bit into it, which was fun.
And also, I'll interrupt, ma'am, if you will allow me one second. To come back to the issue of a documentary and getting it made. So we needed funds, right? And so we had thought we'll do a crowdfunding, but we were not very successful in Geet Gaya Patharon Mein because we just didn't know how to go about it well. But for the cuisine cook-along, we called it the Kohinoor Kitchen Cook-along. And in that, Juhi Ahmed, a dear friend, was the anchor. And she was excellent. And she really, helped push that message, and since we had such a huge response, we got some crowd funds there as well. So in the making of the documentary, that's an interesting element that, from then on, and Man will now tell us about the other 2 sessions also, but there were people who actually responded and sent us the money. And this, please allow me the opportunity to ask our viewers today, if you can, we are now in this outreach, taking the film everywhere. And we managed it beautifully. We've saved the money to pay these managers and all this, and we have it in place. But we need a little bit of funding to buy a projector and a screen to go into government schools and poorer spaces that don't have this infrastructure. So if you can find it in your heart, please send us a small donation. It'll go a long way. And you can go to our website, otherkohinoors.com. And there's a donate page and you can do it if you wish. There is no compulsion. Please don't send any money if you cannot or will not, no problem at all. But if you can, please do. Thank you. Yeah, Man, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Dakhani Miniatures was on Dakhani Miniatures was our next, because we didn't meet. We spoke to Navina Haidar. Navina Haidar is a curator at the Met Museum. And in 2000, and I think it was 16, she had curated a show on Dakhani miniatures.
It was called Sultans of the Deccan. Yeah.
And she brought to light the fact that here are all these fabulous rocks in these miniatures, and showed us close-ups of these rocks, which had animal faces in them.
Wow.
And so she and another well-known artist who Uma brought from...
Kathleen James Chakravarti. She's a professor of visual art and architecture, very knowledgeable.
And she's from Dublin, and she came on board too. And so we had both of them present the miniatures and then talk about them. And that was quite an amazing talk, given that you have 2 well-known curators who are into Dakhani miniatures. I know practically everything about them. Then we were hoping to do Dakhani and film with Sham Benigal. But then we got sidetracked and they got sidetracked. And no, it was just COVID and it didn't happen. So those were the 3. What we did come out with was a cookbook. So we collected recipes from well-known Hyderabadis and who gave us their family recipes. Now it could be a dal, it could be a keema, it could be the vegetarian meal, but we put it together and we offered it to all those who had donated money for the film. It was a token of a thank you to all of them. So that was also, took a lot of work putting it all together. We had people who designed it for us and did a lot of work on that too. So that was on the Without the Cookbook, I'm Here to Wonder series, which we are hoping to continue at some point.
We did one more just before the premiere. It was called Sango Shairi, and that was Shairi and Rocks. And that was another amazing, amazing session with just world-class names talking about how the cultural imagination really sees the rocks, sees this landscape. It was wonderful, really. And all of these are on our website. Anyone can go and catch the recording. So, yeah.
Yeah, Giridhar is back, so that means it's time for us. I mean, we can go on. There's so much to talk about the film, but the best thing to do is to actually watch the film at HLF later this month. Over to you, Professor Giridhar Rao, for the question.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent, lovely conversation. And that's a project that seems to have happened in the midst of the pandemic. Amazing. Yes, thank you so much. It's a optimism of the will. Absolutely. Thank you so much. We've had quite a few people listening in quite carefully. So there are comments, several comments from our audiences. But the first one is probably to take off where Nikhila just left off, namely that please see it later in the month. Namely, we have information that this documentary will be screened at HLF between January 27th and 29th in person. Please do attend. And after the screening, there will be a conversation with the Telugu film director, Mohan Krishna Indraganti. So there is that as well. There was a question related to that, whether the documentary will be screened online when it is shown in person during the HLF. I have no information on that. If there is any such plan, perhaps it will certainly be announced. Any reaction from any of you?
No, I have no information about any online screening. We haven't gone online yet.
Okay, right. Okay. A question came, a comment came early in the conversation about how this topic is personal for every viewer, and that was striking for me as well. That somehow just in the conversation about it, even without having watched the film, there is a sense that I'm relating to it personally as individuals, and that I thought was the discourse around it, the words, the way you have presented the whole documentary seemed to connect to individual people. Would either of you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful thing. I mean, really, over and over again, we're now in this outreach, and Nikhila, you asked us about it, but we didn't get a chance to get to that. So the outreach is we're taking this film to every possible space. It's a really unique way to show a film. You know, we are taking it. It's free of cost. There's nothing. We're asking nothing except that they watch the film and talk about the rocks. So this is the ask, and we have anyone can approach us, and we go to wherever they want us to go. And it's already, if you go to the website, you will see the number of spaces we've already covered. And what you're saying, Giri, and the commentator has so kindly mentioned, is exactly that. Over and over, we're getting this, that this is my story. I feel this. You know, I know this. I have this. This is my backyard. You know, everybody across the board, this response is unanimous. And that has just been a wonderful thing. And that, I think, to again go back to Nikhila's ask about why the cultural aspect, I think because this is our shared culture. This doesn't belong to anyone. It's all of our culture. And therefore, whenever it appears, you feel like if you see the Golconda story, we all know Golconda. We've all walked those rocks. So we feel, oh, we know this story. This is my story as well. And so, in some way, it just taps into our common imagination, really. Yeah.
And I think when we were making this film, there's so many people who volunteered was just because of that they felt it was their story and it was part of them, and therefore they had to give. And the one way of giving was to volunteer.
In fact, the way you've talked about how the outreach of the film was the subject of another question about asking how it has been received in the city, and you have already answered that.
I'd just like to interrupt here quickly. And, apart from this total connect that is happening with how it's presented, the other thing is that people are talking about the rocks and how we can save them from children. There's one of our outreach managers, Smita Rane, who's doing a wonderful job. She was hauled over the coals, by this young girl in the Zilla Parishad school. And she said, ma'am, but your teacher, you're saying don't break rocks, and how will we build houses? We need the thing. And where will we go? And genuine questions are coming up. There are questions that should be asked. And many, many solutions also are coming up. From the children's, it's an amazingly delightful variety. But maybe Mahanur would like to read out some serious responses that she has got. Right, Man? From the Colonel as well as Nadir.
Well, I think Nadir is online, has written in YouTube.
Okay. There's some lovely suggestions by these two gentlemen, which is part of this, what you're asking, Giri, the response about, people responding in the outreach and how the conversation is building and growing. So,
I can read out. This is from Colonel Kanchan Bhattacharya. Unfortunately, he couldn't attend today. And he's written, I put my thoughts here since I would be traveling tonight again. There's a need to understand the stability of geological strata if superficial surface boulders and monoliths are continually disturbed, as is the apparent case in Hyderabad. The term is urban geology, and inputs must have been available as to the strata below the skyscraper structures in, say, the western side of the city, high-tech Kokapet belt. Is there a systematic record at all? Over-urbanization also leads to depletion of subterranean water, the progressive and almost methodical destruction of this vital resource. What about rainwater harvesting? How is it monitored? And where does the rainwater flow to in the surrounding of this city? Cities are usually sited around water source that double as means of transportation. Hyderabad is not one of those and needs water from dams like Singur, about 100 kilometers away. However, the presence of industries ensures progressive pollution besides the unmanageable volume and weight of bio-undegradable products of this city. One such effect is the poisoning of the water beneath the ground. Urban geological data should be created by builders and collated as the geological survey detachments in and around the city. So that's from the Colonel.
A viewer has asked, has the song been released as a single? It must.
Yeah, we do. We tried to do it at HLF. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out. But we're trying to figure out where we can release it. And Murtu is, he's our guide. And Zach Aladdin, who's everyone knows in the city for his, he is so good with the sound stages for all the shows in the city. So between the two of them, we will release it. And it will be freely available for anybody to download. So wonderful. Yes, that's a promise. That's a promise. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, a similar question about how the conversation around the film continues to fascinate one of the viewers after all these years. So it looks like it's a continuing engagement with the emotions that the film has aroused in our viewers.
Yeah, and one wonderful development has been, like, I mentioned that we've been doing this outreach to different schools, colleges, this, that, and the other, cafes and all. Wonderfully, like, for instance, the Telangana Forest Academy, the Telangana Police Academy, one of the schools of architecture, have all said, and some schools have come back and said, can we do it again? Can we do it annually for different batches? So what we're going to do is just give them the film, and they can show it every time. And if we're around and we can join them, that's wonderful. Or if one of our outreach managers can join it, it's wonderful. But that's another great development, that we can give it to people to use it in an ongoing way, and the conversation stays fresh with new batches of.
Yeah, and the human component of it has moved several people here. There were comments about the stone cutters. It's that there is no protective gear, nothing. They just have to suffer this. But on the other hand, it's also a craft, says one of the viewers, carrying on through generations. There is respect for the rock that their rock cutters have, which machines don't have, the commentator says.
Lovely. That's exactly what we feel. Yeah.
A question about, since you were talking about outreach, is there a plan to take this film to the festival circuit, asks the viewer?
Yes, very much so. Haven't had the time to get to that. First Hyderabad, then everything else. So yeah, definitely there's a plan. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of our questions. Nikhila, do you want to add something more, and then maybe?
Sorry, go ahead, Nikhila. I think
no, you both can have, you can say, have your last words, and then I'll just wrap it up. So Manur and Uma, just you can just say what you want to say in the end of this conversation, so that I can come in and wrap it up.
Go ahead, Manur.
Well, we'd like all of you to go and see the film if you haven't seen it. Look around and you'll see it in the city. It should be broadcast soon, we hope. Once, as Uma keeps saying, we finish with Hyderabad. It's been an amazing journey in making this film with Uma. And I hope you all will get to sing it someday.
Yes.
Thank
I hope we're all singing this song, really, because it's such a lovely song. Giri, you remember it from when we had that meeting, and it was such fun, I used Satya, BB Teja, you all inputted so beautifully and so generously. I just really strongly ask that you write in to us, all of you here, ask your friends, anybody, if you want a screening, if you know of a space we can come and screen, tell us. We'll bring the film, and we usually send a discussant along who will lead a post-screening discussion. And we have a huge follow-up plan after that. Also, Nikhila, you did ask, but we didn't have time to go over it. We have a big plan called the Other Kohinoor project, and you could go to our website and take a look at it, at what we want to do. And we can only do it with your help, all of you. This is not something that Man and I can go around and do on our own. So everyone is welcome to write to us and suggest a space that we can take the film to, and we'll be more than delighted to do it. This is what we want to do with this film. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Uma and Manur, thank you very much for responding to those questions. And I think a lot of people, have got just enough information to kindle their curiosity to go and watch this film. One would have thought that a film on rocks, what can you make about rocks being center stage? Because we're so used to having rocks as part of the backdrop, as part of, as we say, mute witnesses. But here in your film, they come alive, they speak, they have spoken to many people, as we can see from the responses. So thanks again for making this wonderful film, for patiently, conducting this conversation with me. And thanks, Giri and HLF, for making this film, putting this film out like this, and this conversation out like this for people to listen to and go and watch the film. Thank you all once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.